Hello, this is the cert-manager public development meeting, and it's Wednesday, the 16th of June, 2021. Everyone currently here is the normal team from JetStack, so we can just get straight into it. First item on the agenda is, well, we're going to spend most of the meeting talking about features that we want to implement in the 1.5 timeframe, as we've just released 1.4, so congratulations to everyone involved in that. The first item is on the agenda is lifecycle hooks, and I've put Ashley's name against this, so do you have any thing to say about this?
I mean, I guess a lot of what I would say is in the document anyway. Like, I kind of intentionally have left it kind of open to different implementations. Tried to be fairly general about it because there's different ways of going about this. I guess I don't really have a great deal specific to say about it. I think it's a good feature, and there seems to be use cases for it. I suppose I have a little bit of reticence with it in that because it's like a pluggable system to allow arbitrary execution of code. It feels a bit like it's a catch-all, like almost by definition it's a catch-all. And it feels like there might be better, like, specialized solutions for each thing, for each use case that we're trying to solve, rather than just having a catch-all. So I suppose when you look at like pluggable secret backends, they solve certain things for certain people, and they, being more specific, you'll be able to give better error messages when they fail, that probably be easier to follow. They don't pollute the sort of workflow of everything. Equally, by it being general, it's obviously usable for pretty much anything, and being opt-in, like, that takes some of the sting out of the power of them, because they're opt-in. So if a user chooses to write a hook which does something stupid, it's their own fault. So, like, that takes some of the heat off us, I suppose, for like ensuring that we don't need to ensure that they pass correctly necessarily or anything like that. I suppose one thing on this is that I have as a possible implementation jobs, Kubernetes jobs. Something that's not particularly easy to discover is that a lot of people dislike Kubernetes jobs sort of generally. Like, Jake, you explained this to me a bit yesterday. It was yesterday, yeah, that sort of it's hard to track whether they finish. They're very much sort of a at least once kind of thing, which can be fine, but it requires that everyone make their hooks idempotent, and it's easy to get that wrong. Yeah, Jake put some pretty good points across about why jobs are suboptimal, which I guess points us in the direction of using message queues or another implementation.
So what came up in the discussion of this, in what we had on the public Slack, is, so there were two suggestions. So one from James Munley, who said, probably should just write a controller for certificates, and because that will give you all updates. And then there was a solution from someone inside JetStack who did this recently using Argo events, which can trigger arbitrary events based on when a Kubernetes object changed. So I'm personally against these kind of solutions, because while they're very good solutions, they require you to know exactly what you're doing, whereas most people probably want something much simpler. Because obviously, like, writing a controller, you'll have complete control over the lifecycle management, but requires you to know how to write a controller. And for me, the constructing an Argo events pipeline that can react to it is the same response, but instead of writing a Go controller, you're firstly having to deploy Argo, which is fairly complicated in itself, and then write a workflow in Argo YAML, which is again more code. So you have to know exactly what you're doing. So I feel like I want to write another controller inside cert-manager that can just publish messages to a message queue, and you can opt in on a specific resource, so like certificate requests or certificates, and then even down to a specific namespace through some kind of config. And it will just spit events to a message queue. So it's like the writing a controller part, except that we write the controller and then other people can just receive the messages.
I'm of the other opinion. Sorry for that. Anyway. I'm of the other opinion. I don't. I think it's acceptable for people to write their own controllers, and they don't even need to kind of quote unquote write their own controllers. I think it'd be fine for us to just create like a boilerplate repo, and it just has a bunch of kind of empty functions. Just kind of just insert your code here. We can take care of all the kind of controller runtime messiness, etc. Because anyone who's going to consume this feature, or at least any kind of author of the feature that's going to use this, they're going to be writing code anyway. So I think the kind of argument for the kind of Kubernetes job type thing, I don't necessarily agree with that, because at some point somewhere someone is writing code to do something they want to do. So I do think that just us providing some kind of boilerplate repo with empty functions kind of does the same thing. Yeah.
I think there's a quite big difference between writing a Kubernetes controller, even with boilerplate provided, and writing a function which takes an event as input. Like, I feel like writing a Kubernetes controller is probably more daunting for people. There's more you need to know. There's more actual literal code that you need to copy, and really you need to understand it if you're going to be running it in your cluster. And on top of that, it's code that they need to run. Like they need to make sure it keeps them running. Obviously, they need to run something to do this. But if it's a cert-manager provided controller, they don't need to worry about the sort of uptime guarantees of that controller as much, because they just rely on us to do it right. Whereas if they had to write their own, they have to do it right themselves, I guess. Like, and I feel like saying write a controller is quite a big hurdle for someone who just wants to like, if they use the sort of a function as a service type world, they want the equivalent of like run an AWS Lambda or whatever for this given event, and write a controller is quite a different thing to that. And like a job is in a similar way. A job is anyone running Kubernetes can write a pod that will do something, which is what a job essentially is. They can't necessarily write a controller successfully.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I'm sort of proposing, because the boilerplate repository, whatever, it's not really a controller in the same kind of sense as like a Kubernetes operated controller, because it's not actually doing any writes. So it is effectively just the same thing. It doesn't really matter to the author what's backing that function call, and you effectively end up with the same result, is my feeling. Yeah. Because you basically have like a, object was created function, object was updated function, object was deleted function. Insert your code here. Kubernetes create deployment. That was what I was thinking.
I just have one tiny question. I saw in the document that we were talking about blocking the flow before sending, or like while processing this event, we would block the cert-manager flow. Like, did I understand correctly?
I mean, we're talking about it in as much as like it's in the document as a potential thing that could be done. Like having that as a feature enables certain other things. It enables people to sort of stop in the flow and make sure that something happens before it progresses onwards. But
Yeah,
it seems like a fairly controversial thing to have. And
no, I'm not saying that. It's just that the controller approach would not allow us to do that, because you can't block anything with controllers, like unless, for example, for the approval work, we had to create a specific condition and make sure this condition is properly implemented in all the control, like all the external issuers and so on, so that they would be blocked at some point. So I don't understand how we could let people use controllers when we don't have a way to block on anything using controllers.
I don't. What I was going to say is we don't necessarily need to block on anything like that.
Yeah.
It would be like a
enables
potential
stuff.
feature.
Yeah, it enables certain other stuff, but it might not be desirable to have it, and I suspect probably isn't desirable.
And one thing I wanted to add is, so at GitLab they had a similar discussion where they could have just let people use the API to, like, they wanted to let companies be able to build auditing tools around GitLab, and they didn't know how to do this. And so at first they thought they would just let the people use the API, like build a REST API for this. And then they ended up doing this event thing, which was just lighter and didn't require a lot of knowledge about the. Anyways, it's, and one thing also. Wait, I forgot. So never mind.
I think it's a good point that it speaks to the sort of power.
Yes.
Oh, go on.
Sorry, yes, auditing. Yes, so it actually not only enables what this so what you said, so it life cycle hooks, but also it could enable other use cases like auditing. That's something I don't know how people would do it. Probably they would write a controller if they wanted to have an auditing trail around certificates. I'm not sure how that would work.
The API server can provide audit logs. So,
but if you want to like augment it and go for like beyond what the API server.
Yeah, I was thinking about certificate transparency as a far off feature, which it would be another way of doing that. But I guess we shouldn't spend our whole meeting on one feature. But that's really good discussion anyway. Thanks, everyone. While we were talking, we got 2 new people join. So welcome Husam and Param. I guess we should move on to accepting the AWS PCA issuer. So thanks very much for all the effort you put into this, and Param and team. This will be the first completely externally written project that will go into the cert-manager or GitHub organization. Can't hear you, Param.
No. No.
Still got nothing.
Not yet. Almost.
We've all been there with sort of cycling through different inputs trying to get it to recognize something.
Oh, someone clicked before me.
Got to be fast. Hello. Still can't hear you, unfortunately.
Okay, I mean, I can keep talking. So Farron's been in contact with me over the last week, and we're spinning up our Amazon are sponsoring some infrastructure costs, so we can run continuous tests against the PCA issuer. And PCA is AWS's private certificate authority, which is part of AWS. It's an AWS service that lets you manage PKI using hardware-backed HSMs, which is a very useful thing for cert-manager to be able to issue certificates from. So, yeah, it's really good to have that under the cert-manager project. And I think we were planning to accept it basically this week or today. It depends what it requires a little bit of back and forth on both of our sides. But
can you guys hear me now? I'm using a different mic.
Yes. Hello.
Finally, I don't know why my headset is not working today. But yeah, Jake, thanks for the intro. Yep. I think we are really looking forward to this collaboration and just making making this experience better for our customers going forward. So we have heard a lot of demand, our customers asking us for cert-manager integration. So I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So yeah, we'll accept. We're ready to accept the repository, and we'll just have to do that over the next day or so.
Sounds great. And Jake, probably we can coordinate offline. So I'll reach out to you. I know Johan was supposed to join today. He might be pulled into another call. So I'll talk to him, and we can schedule something between three of us and have it transferred. So once we click the transfer, I'll just ping you, and we can take it from there. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks very much. Cool. So yeah, we kind of went back and forth there, but the rest of the meeting is about features that we're going to try and implement during the 1.5 lifecycle time, because we just released 1.4. So the next item is me and Mail talking about possible how we're going to solve HTTP 01 solving without ingress in the next release. So we're still in the kind of idea stage, and we have two ideas. It's either that we make the HTTP 01 solver pluggable, so similar to our DNS webhook, where anyone can implement a DNS provider by creating a Kubernetes API service that cert-manager will call to provision DNS records. We could have a similar one for HTTP. Or the other one is to talk about the SIG's networking gateway API, which it seems that a lot of the ecosystem's service mesh solutions are kind of iterating towards. So if we were to just support gateway API, would that solve the problem rather than creating pluggable solvers for each individual like service ingress solution? So did you get any information? Because I mean, we're still in the early idea stage, so we don't have solid things to say yet.
Yeah, so I went, so I'll share my screen so that you can follow along. So the first thing I wanted to see is which implementations of this new API. So as a quick reminder, the gateway API is a replacement or like a more evolved version of the Ingress API. So this Ingress object that you could use for doing L7, for configuring L7 networking. Usually it would be for an API gateway or some proxy. And yeah, the thing that I wanted to see is which proxies were actually implementing this. The API is quite complex. It has 4 different objects instead of just one. So contour, GKE, glue, Istio, and the one I've been playing with just because I already had a thing working is Traffic. Before doing anything, I went to the Slack channel SIG network gateway API, and I've sent this message letting people that use the gateway. Well, I don't know who is in this channel. There are how many? 300 people. So people who did this gateway API stuff, and I said that we were thinking about implementing support for it. Maybe either in tree, as you said, as a way to support many different proxies, or as like an out of tree that would use this new HTTP01 pluggable thing. And unfortunately, like I was kind of expecting someone to pop up and say, "Oh, I'm interested, and can I join?" But no one really said anything, except for Mark Church, who is someone I do not know, and said it's great news. And he says he was secretly hoping that cert-manager would do something with the gateway API. So that was my first step. And then, so yeah, what I did is open this. I did the right manifest to test it, and the goal was to see which objects would have to be created for supporting HTTP01. Yeah, so it would be the gateway class. I don't know about the gateway class because this one would be provided by the ops people. So you would imagine that we support the gateway API. Imagine that we support the gateway API. We would have in our configuration somewhere a gateway class reference because that's not, and also a gateway, I think. Maybe. I'm not sure exactly, but some objects would be already existing. Unlike for the Ingress already, like it's self-contained. There is only one object that you create. Am I understanding correctly that the HTTP01 implementation for the Ingress object, the only thing it does is create another Ingress with the right path, and it reuses the same service as like the same service as the pod that we are supposed to like to be we're trying to do the challenge for. Am I correct, Jake? I cannot see any faces, so I'm not sure.
I think it updates the existing Ingress unless you specify.
Yeah.
Okay. So it updates the current one with this new path, and it forwards this to a new service. Am I correct? A new service that we create.
And so for each in-flight HTTP challenge, currently we modify the ingress and create a pod and service in that namespace that can solve the HTTP challenge.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, imagining we support this, then we would create 3 different objects. I think, I'm not sure, 3 or maybe 2, because I still do not know which objects are already existing on the cluster and which ones are like specific to the service.
So
But the service itself would be the same.
I'm hoping just from reading what you have on your screen that we would be able to add a new HTTP route.
Oh yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, sorry.
Or add a rule
you're
to
right.
it.
Exactly, you're right. you would definitely add a new rule like this and do the thing that we do, well-known thing, well-known, blah 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 blah, and forward that to a new service that we create, like challenge service something. I guess that's what. Yeah. Yes. I think I just didn't really know how the ingress thing was working, so so it would only be a matter of this apparently.
So it looks like it would be fairly easy to add support for Gateway API, but is that good enough for every user? I guess that's what we have to find out by asking people. Because or looking at or at least testing on all of these, testing on all the implementations of Gateway API, which sounds awful to work out how to do.
So it seems like they all would work similarly. Oh no, sorry, you're right. We would have this problem of how do they implement things, as usual. Like it's the same problem as we currently have.
Same as the pluggable, same as the lifecycle hooks discussion. Really, it's like, okay, do you make something that is extensible and really hard to use, or do we support this API and then tell people if you don't support the standard API, then you're on your own.
Yeah, and there is another thing that I like. There is no question on whether or not we're going to implement support for the Gateway API if it takes off, because obviously we want to be supporting this. But so the question is rather, is it sufficient to just support the Gateway API and not do this HTTP01 pluggable thing? The first thing I tried with this Gateway API is to use external DNS, and like many tools that rely on the current ingress objects, and it doesn't support it yet. And I expect many things don't support it yet.
About the Istio virtual services.
Sorry, what?
The Istio virtual services.
Oh, I'm not sure about Istio because I didn't check it out. I guess I should. Yeah, they probably map it to their own internal objects.
Yeah, I don't know if they're probably heavily inspired from it, from what I understand. But this thing is meant to be more generic. And actually, that's a good thing, I think, in this case, because the gateway, I believe, I don't know how you can set a default one, but it's the gateway class that's going to be specific to whatever Nginx or Contour or whatever. But the gateway should be generic. So theoretically, you could have, I don't know if you can make a new gateway resource and add the root to it, or bind, because it needs to be 2 ways. You need to say this root belongs to this gateway and this gateway belongs to this root. So you either have to modify an existing gateway or make a new gateway and scope it to the type, but you don't have to care about the particular. Well, the idea of it is that it's meant to be generic, the gateway bit. The gateway class is so that can simplify doing it that way instead of the pluggable way, from what I understand. But this is also very alpha, it seems, so I don't know. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mail and Hissam. I think probably enough. That's probably enough to go and write something down at least. And yeah, that's true.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't really do like a real.
Yeah, I wasn't
reasoning.
I wasn't expecting us to come out of this meeting saying this is exactly how we're going to. This is exactly what we're going to do, and we know exactly what we're going to do. But yeah, it was really useful. So thanks everyone. Next item on the agenda is migration of Ingress v1 beta 1 to the v1 networking Ingress API. And that's got Hervé's name against it. So you talk about this feature.
Cool. We talked about that last time already, and there were a couple of good ideas that came up. I was working a little bit on the design doc, and there seemed to be. What's up?
Sorry, can you refresh my memory? What's
Should I
the
share my
gist?
screen with this thing, maybe?
Oh, that would be nice.
Or let's see if my machine dies or not. Cool. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Right. So in order to support the 122 Kubernetes that we think will potentially that probably would need to be supported by cert-manager 1.5, we need to deal with the fact that the networking v1 beta 1 Ingress API is not going to be served anymore. And because we still wanted to support the 1.16 to 1.18 Kubernetes, which does not serve the replacement v1 API, we need to. This is just to come up with a solution how we can support both at the same time. It's like this is really like an internal thing, so it's the least hacky way. So there seems to be 3 options at the moment. One is to pick up March's work, where she had started working on implementing some conversion code, quite similar to how they're already doing it upstream, to convert between the types in the networking API, and just use the discovery client to figure out which is the currently preferred version, and just do the conversion. And the second is the idea that I think Richard came up with in the last meeting, which was to have basically like 2 copies of all the functionality that uses Ingress, which is basically the HTTP/01 solver and the Ingress shim, and not do any conversion, just use whichever copy is appropriate. So in case of the HTTP/01, it will be just spinning up either one or the other solver. And in case of the Ingress shim, I think maybe we could just have like a second controller perhaps for that. Like would be the least hacky way. And then the third would be just to use the dynamic client, and that returns the unstructured type. And yeah, we would still need to have like a bunch of if statements in the code where we would be converting the unstructured client to the either v1 or v1 beta 1, depending on which one is the underlying type. And yeah, the alternative was to drop the support for the older versions of Kubernetes, but we already figured out that that's probably not what we want to do, since GKE will still be supporting the 122 up till next year, April or so. Yeah, so I was just wondering how we could probably try to decide which approach to take. Because I feel like there are potential pitfalls. Like they all introduce some legacy code that will only exist for a couple of months and is going to be hacky in one way or another. Either there will be like lots of if statements in the code, or we'll be running like 2 versions, or we'll be using unsafe types. So I guess it's like the least evil.
Do you have a preference? Have we done the most research?
I think that actually like the 2 copies seem to be the best for me. I was against it in the previous meeting because I thought that in v1 19 to 21, both versions are served, but actually the discovery client already returns the preferred version. So we would be able to discover quite easily which is the preferred version at the time. Before I thought that the 2 copies of the English shim, if we were running them at the same time, they would clash because they would both intend to monitor the same thing. But no, I actually think we could, like for the HTTP01 solver, I think it will be quite easy. We would just use the discovery client at the point where we set up the issuer and spin up either one or the other solver. For the English shim, I don't know how bad it would be to have a second controller that would just be for the Ingress v1 beta 1 API that users could themselves enable and disable the other one. Like, because for Ingress shim, there is kind of Ingress is used from the top already. We have like Ingress listers and informers. And that feels like it could be kind of cleaner in terms of once we didn't need it anymore, we could just literally remove these unnecessary copies and just keep the necessary ones instead of like having lots of if statements. And yeah, there's like a small caveat that I was thinking of is that the v1 beta 1 package probably will be removed from I imagine it will be removed from the API. So we might need to copy the code, but that's not a problem yet. I don't see it being removed yet.
The only thing I can think of if we have 2 copies is we just have to make sure error handling is fine with one of the 2 running, right?
So I wasn't thinking about, I was actually not thinking anymore about 2 copies running simultaneously. I was thinking that maybe if there were 2 controllers, users could explicitly themselves enable the second one if they wanted to run on Kubernetes 1.16 to 1.18. I'm not sure how, but
we do have command line flags for enabling controllers.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine, actually.
Yeah, I feel like that's fine. I feel like most people, this might be just a guess, but I feel like most people who would be wanting to use the latest version of cert-manager would likely already be having maybe more up-to-date clusters too. Just knowing how people's workflows are. But
I'm in favor of dropping support for Kubernetes 1.16. I mean, so you
1.16 to 1.18. Just to clarify, it would have to be 1.16 to 1.18.
Yeah, okay. Even still, so if you're on Kubernetes 1.18, sorry, my phone rang. Sorry. If you're on Kubernetes 1.18, you could, if it was just the Ingress shim you were cared about, you could kind of hack together an installation of cert-manager where you're installing the latest cert-manager 1.15 plus the Ingress shim from some earlier version. The Ingress shim is quite a standalone component.
It'd be the HTTP01 solver too for the Acme issuer, if they're using that.
That would be the problem, yeah.
But yes, for basically at the point where we are going to release cert-manager 1.5, I think it is likely that it will only be GKE stable channel, and I think one AWS CKS potentially that will at that point will still be supporting 1.18 as of my understanding. The rest seem to be already on 1.19-ish minimum.
So the last support for 1.18 would be on December 2021 on GKE.
Yeah, this is, I think,
from
September.
It's hard to really because when you look at the GKE schedule, it's not a schedule. It's like you have to look at when the stable stable line will get removed from the table. I don't know how to explain this.
I think it's the 5.
So December 2021. And we're going to release 1.5 in August. So it's 4 months.
Sorry, Mile.
It's
It's
March 2022.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So actually, no. Wait. Come back to this doc. I should have explained. So when you read this and you look at the control planes right above, control planes using the static version. So I think the static version is for nodes and not for the control planes, because
No, static. I think that static, like there are 3 release channels, right, for the and when you create a GK cluster, and the static version is when you hard code your version rather than enrolling it into a rapid, regular, or stable channel.
But there is a note here that is, I don't understand it then. Like control planes of clusters using a static version, so the node channel version, are upgraded automatically after a new minor version has been made to the default, blah, 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 and earlier versions have become unavailable. That's how I found out about this December 2021. It's when the latest minor version of Kubernetes will go away from the stable table that you have at the top. Yeah, that's it's to be honest, I hate this. Their documentation about dates is terrible. Like you can't see the end of life of the no, like both things.
Okay, I'm going to step in and say that we don't need to worry about this right now, because I just want to make sure we finish all of our items.
But yeah, also like it's control planes, and we install cert-manager. Oh yeah, but this is control planes.
Yeah, exactly. We don't care about nodes. We care about the control plane only.
That's a good point. So I'll update. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, we can talk about this internally and argue about documentation. But thanks for. So I think that's the most complete of all the features we've talked about, and it's going to get worked on and definitely happen in 1.5. So thanks, everybody. Last 2 things are moving cert-manager CSI from JetStack to the cert-manager org. Don't know if Josh has anything to say about that apart from it's going to happen. Gonna assume nothing apart from it's going to happen. Cool. And
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Can barely hear
you. Yeah.
Oh, yes. In the subway.
And let's just say it's going to happen, and not worry too much about that for this call. And the last talking point is removing Bazel for good. So this keeps coming up because Kubernetes Upstream removed Bazel in 1.20, and we don't really get any benefit from it anymore. So I think, as far as I can tell, the benefits are the build cache, which is sort of solved by Go module proxies, as in when you do a Go mod download, you can use a cache near to you if you desire. Reproducible builds we also get. However, because of the Go sum database, if you now at least have a hope of reproducing the same build if you just check out Go code. And yeah, those are the main benefits that we got from Bazel, whereas that we don't really need. And there are lots of downsides that keep coming up. Like, it's really difficult to parameterize our builds. And this happened today when we can't develop for cert-manager if we're using a Apple Silicon machine, because there's no Darwin ARM targets. And going through all of the dependencies and adding more file source definitions for them is fairly painful. Whereas if we were using a like makefile and a script, which is basically what Kubernetes has moved to, we could just set go OS and go Arch. We can retrieve those and use them to download any tools that we need. Is that a decent enough summary? Anyone got anything that I forgot?
Sounds like a good summary to me. So very, very quickly had a look earlier at stuff like this file where we currently define our pre-submits for cert-manager. If we could get, I mentioned this earlier today as well internally, if we can get to a point where all of these pre-submits for in the container spec, the args are just make something. So the job is like for running the tests, it would be make test, which would run Bazel test, jobs equals 1, everything. If we can get to that point with things parameterized in the make file, ideally by environment variables there, that would be a good first step, I think, to migrating, because then we can migrate each make target piecemeal away from Bazel. So if for the test target, we can change it to use go test and jobs are good. I think that feels like a good place to me, and it gives us the easy win of every single target that's being run in CI is available to us on our machines identically. So we can easily run anything that is run on CI locally with the same command that's run on CI, if we're strict about them all being calls to make.
Cool. Sounds good to me. I just remembered one more con that came up during the 1.4 release period, is that Bazel visibility rules can be written in a way that means that you can create code that will build with Bazel, but not with normal Go. So that's just another Bazel thing that we wouldn't run into.
Yeah, that's a win to avoid.
Yeah, it's not that Bazel is bad in any way. It's just that the advantages it gave us are mostly solved with Go modules. Cool. So that's the end of the agenda. And anyone have anything they'd like to add at the last second?
Say that out loud, Hussein. Makefiles will make you pull your hair out at some point there. That is the danger.
Undoubtedly. So we did actually, when we talked about this in our stand-up, we did make the point that if we replace Bazel, make sure that whatever replacing it isn't worse.
Sorry, Param, we can't hear you again.
I think we got a blip for a second.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We heard you until you muted again.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I guess one last thing. So I saw Johan is actually trying to do the transfer, but he's getting an error that you don't have the permission to create public repos on cert-manager. So I believe who needs to do the transfer? So either you need to have a transferred repo on the other side where it will be transferred, like somebody needs to create the repo and then it will be mapped as a transfer. Because I have never done it, so I was not sure how this will be done, especially in an organization.
Wait, creating another repo on the existing organization would probably not be the way forward.
Could he give permission to someone like Jake, admin permission on the existing PCA repo to Jake, or someone else who has admin permission on the cert-manager org, and they could do the actual move themselves?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, we can coordinate it. We can coordinate it in a chat offline, because there was something about make sure the names were correct as well, right?
Right. All right, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And I'll stop the recording.